This is the Problem-Based Learning Training Seminar. My name is Dr. Mayur Shah. I am the CEO of MK Education. So today we want to talk about what exactly problem-based learning is and why we're implementing it as a part of the training mechanisms at MK Education. We have learned over the years that in allied healthcare training programs, we find students are sometimes qualified with certification and didactic learning, but not necessarily ready to work with patients in real-life settings. Therefore, we have instituted a format of problem-based learning in all MK Education training programs. The purpose of the problem-based learning is it allows the learner to actually learn and the educator to actually teach. What you'll notice in that first sentence is we've taken the word lecture out of the entire format. And I'll digress more in explaining that here in a minute. What we want is for the student to be able to use any type of analytical skills to resolve any practical scenarios that the educator provides in the classroom. We want to distinguish students who are very comfortable with the concepts of what is being taught in the classroom, as opposed to just taking notes and hoping that they learn what was being taught by the educator. This will help them to better understand and not just memorize what the material is, but be prepared to use this information in a real-life setting. What are our goals? Well, our goals are for all the educators to be prepared with effective case studies. Obviously, MK Education has a library database of case studies that educators can use and analyze. But nothing is going to be more confident for students to learn and educators to teach than an educator using their actual scenario in their workplace. I'll explain this a little more in the next few slides. So we're hoping that the case studies will allow the instructor to determine the specific goals that they're hoping to accomplish. This way, the students understand what they're expected to learn, and the educator understands what they're supposed to teach. What we want is application of real-world situations that will force the students to use analytical skills rather than just staying quiet in a classroom. It allows them to be more interactive with the educator. One example here is we want to take a pharmacy situation. So if you were an educator in a pharmacy technician program, it's one thing to regurgitate what is written in the notes or in the PowerPoint slides. It's another to bring a real-life situation into the classroom. So imagine for a moment if you were a pharmacy technician educator and you were teaching a program today on prescription processing. So in order for a student to grasp the full understanding of how to process a prescription in a real pharmacy, it won't be just about memorizing the legal requirements of what a prescription is. They also need to be able to use their soft skills as well as their knowledge of state laws and regulations and operational procedures in a pharmacy to expedite the process of when a prescription is filled. Let's use an example. So imagine you are the pharmacy technician in a pharmacy. Patient comes in, drops off a prescription. The technician student should know, what do you do next? Well, rule number one here is customer service. It's not something you'll find in a textbook or in a manual so commonly. So we want the student to realize anytime a patient comes to a pharmacy in any setting, we want to make sure they utilize their customer service skills first. And by using customer service skills first, we are able to use more than just the knowledge that is learned in a classroom, but also be able to allow the student to welcome the patient as a customer in that center. So in the case scenario, what is happening is the technician asks a whole bunch of questions, starting with, welcome to our pharmacy. We appreciate your business. What can I do for you today? Patient says, I have a prescription that needs to be processed. Technician says, have you been to our pharmacy before? Patient says, yes, I have. Technician says, great. Well, welcome back to our pharmacy. Please give me just a moment to look up your records and make sure it's up to date. Patient says, okay. Technician says, okay, I see that you are still at such and such street in such and such city and zip code. This is your email address and this is your phone number. Patient confirms. Then the pharmacy technician says, it looks like the last time you have this prescription filled was over a month and a half ago. Patient says yes. And then the technician makes these notes in whatever the pharmacy provides in terms of note setting, so that the pharmacist knows that the patient is not only non-compliant, but also is aware of what the medication is. Now let's imagine the medication is actually for diabetes. Now the technician has an opportunity to say, okay, sir, while I process your prescription for this medication, I notice that this medication is used for diabetes. When is the last time you were able to have your meter checked or your test strips filled? Patient says, I haven't. I don't even check my blood sugar. Technician makes note of it and says, please allow about at least 10 to 15 minutes to talk to the pharmacist about some strategies to help you get a new monitor for free and be able to monitor your blood sugar. Patient says, great. In this whole scenario that I've just gone over with you, this can be done in a classroom. Students are expected to work in groups, and they're supposed to work in groups to resolve various scenarios. So I just gave you the situation that happens very commonly in a retail pharmacy practice. However, many of those questions that I put out there, technicians don't ask. Either they don't know how to ask, or they're not confident enough to be able to ask the right questions. This is what we want to do at MK Education. We want students to feel comfortable so that when they're out there in the workplace, they know what to say and they feel confident in saying it. Okay? So students who work in groups are given different situations. In the situation we use in our example, for the prescription processing example, we would alter it by saying, okay, now technician says, I notice you filled this prescription only 2 weeks ago. I can put this prescription on hold. Patient doesn't understand and looks confused. So in this situation, explain to one group how would you handle the situation and what would you say to the patient. In group B, which would be another group, give them a different situation and say, the prescription is being filled, but it says prior authorization required. What does prior authorization required mean to a patient and to a technician? And how does the technician explain this to the patient so that the issue is resolved? So these scenarios are very important for technicians to understand and to analyze. Finally, we want students to know what it means to handle situations where they will have to involve a pharmacist and at times where they can resolve things on their own. The next thing is, for an educator to have this type of format, obviously they will have to come to class prepared with a case study. So as an instructor, what we want you to do is to take some time and think about the different case scenarios that would be involved with the topic of the day. So if the topic was prescription processing, we want you to talk about situations that turned out bad and situations that turned out great, and explain what led to those situations. That way all your students can learn from your real-life example. It's also important to keep the discussions with the students going. How do we do that? Not just to ask questions, but to throw out their different scenarios. Now students are engaged in the concept. As a student who is going to be going on and working in a pharmacy, they now understand the concept of customer service. They understand the importance of documenting different things the patient says objectively for a pharmacist to be able to evaluate in their consultations. It also allows the technician to feel more of a professional stature. They understand their impact on the healthcare, not only of the patient, but the cost of healthcare itself. That's why it's important to talk about the whole situation of the effect of monitoring all the right questions and communicating this to the pharmacist. Those situations can come in real life scenarios for any technician that moves forward. Now, of course, you can use the same strategy in any of our classes at MK Education, whether it's from medical coding to hemodialysis to dental assistant to veterinary assistant. We just alter the way the situation is, but customer service is still a standard. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons of the examples here I've used and what problem-based learning experiences we have. So from a pros concept, students need to be engaged. That is really good, because when you go into a classroom and you tell the students, Put away your notes, close your textbooks, just pay attention to what I'm saying. I'm going to go through a real scenario with you, and then I'm going to alter that scenario, and I'm going to expect you in your groups to come up with the answers and present it to the class. The moment you do that, you have a different type of listening from your students, and the listening is so important in any classroom that we want to offer our programs through MK Education. So students are interested and students are learning. One of the cons for that, though, however, is students can't be engaged if they're completely clueless on the topic. That's why it is absolutely pertinent that the educator list out all the objectives and expectations that students need to complete prior to coming into the class. This way they have done their homework and they are ready to teach the program. Another con that we can think of is case-based discussions do take a lot of time in class, especially when students want to digress and use personal examples. As any type of healthcare people, we know we have to open our listening ears to any type of patients or owners of pets. They have a whole story to tell us. The same will happen in your classrooms. That's why it's very important to stay on target, make sure you've listed your agenda, and you've completed everything on your agenda. I use the example of this discussion in class right now is excellent. I'm going to table it, write down the notes here, and we can continue it later. But we do have a lot to complete in this class, so I'm going to continue with the next process. Here's an overview of what I was explaining. So let's just go through this step by step. In problem-based learning, the instructor has to prepare and communicate all course expectations to the students. These course expectations are consistent with MK Education objectives provided to you in the manual and in the textbooks. Please make sure that you have reviewed them thoroughly so that you can communicate to students exactly what they will have to do. Now, what students have to do in terms of expectations is a whole variety of details. It starts with what page numbers they need to read. It also includes outside research that they need to do, either to visit a veterinary clinic or visit a dialysis clinic and just see the format. They can also do research on the internet in terms of expectations. Finally, there are always review questions provided in all the workbooks and sometimes the manuals that we provide. It is important for students to review those and have those completed. These are the expectations that should be written on the board or on a computer screen for students to write down prior to coming to their next class. Once all this is complete, the instructor prepares these lesson plans with cases. The instructor has not only reviewed all the review questions and the lecture content that students will be going through, but they've also prepared case scenarios to go alongside with what the topic is. Now, students should have reviewed all the written content that was written down as expectations by the instructor. Students working in their groups will take different scenarios the instructor provides and provide answers. The beauty of working in groups, it takes the pressure off students of being embarrassed as a single answer. When a student works in a group, they have a support mechanism. Students also need to complete in-class exercises. So, for instance, if I was teaching pharmacy calculations and I asked the students what questions do they have from the homework, few questions come out. We will review those concepts in class, but then I will throw out exercises to every group and have one person from each group answer the question on the board. This way, you as the instructor are confident that your students understand the concepts. The most important thing in problem-based learning is moving away from memorization and devoting the entire time to assuring the students understand the concept. That's why instructors must be very clear on their expectations of what they will be looking for from students. In my classrooms, I will always tell my students, by the end of this class, I will not finish my examples until I know every one of you has understood the concept. And I will know that every one of you understand the concept because I will ask you questions directly or you will volunteer. This is the way you can control the class and make it interactive. It's important that instructors communicate not only in a written format, they can also do it in a computerized format, but also re-emphasizing to students every time to complete their review exercise prior to coming to class. I'm sure you're thinking of a lot of questions. Please don't hesitate to bring your questions to MK Education. I'll be happy to answer any of them at any time. A few frequently asked questions that have already come up from instructors are, what happens if we work in one setting of, like, say, for instance, the pharmacy technician program? If you've only worked in retail, how do you come up with case scenarios in a hospital? It's a very good question. That's why it's important to contact MK Education. We have instructors that work in multiple fields. Some work in hospitals, some work in retail, some work in specialty, some work in insurance companies. Same scenario in a veterinary clinic. Some veterinary technicians only deal with large animals. Some veterinary technicians deal with household pets only. So if you're not working in a situation that would involve a large animal, it's important to speak to another veterinary technician so that you can understand a real case scenario to borrow and use in your classroom. These are frequently asked questions that are given to us, and we understand that this is a tough exercise to do, and we are here to answer any of your questions. Another very common question is, what do we do when the students are not prepared to answer the review questions? They didn't do their homework. How do we proceed? It's also a very good question. The way I do it in my class is, students, please tell me what questions you have from the review exercises you have completed. Nobody raises their hand. I say, okay, so since nobody has any questions, you folks have understood the concept very well. What I will do now to confirm you understand the concept is I'm going to start asking questions that were directly related to the homework. When I ask them, I want one person from each group, after you've worked them out in your groups, to come to the board and answer it. If they cannot answer it, or they are unable to understand the concept, it is clear that they not only did not complete the homework, but they're now at a disadvantage because they are taking up extra classroom time. So it's important to emphasize to students that you see in this situation, we could have done more examples, but instead I'm having to re-emphasize the teaching of the concept, which is something that would have been faster if you had done your homework. So it's important to turn their negativity into a positive outcome. If you have any further questions, please address them to MK Education. I thank you very much for your time.